Hi and welcome back to the channel, and in this video I'm going to be building this Junker Ju-87. And this Hobby 2000 kit is a reboxed Hasegawa kit that was initially released in 1993. And even though this kit is nearly 30 years old, it still looks sharp and only has minor flashing. And as usual, I couldn't resist getting some upgrades, so we've got some interior and exterior Eduard detail sets. But the best thing about this kit is that the instruction sheet is only one large page, and that's a far cry from some of the kits I've been tackling recently. And I'm going to build this model in the North African scheme, so here we go. So first thing I do is I remove all the parts of the interior that's necessary to fit the photo etch detail. Here, the Eduard instructions call for a 0.8 sheets of plastic, but I just remove that section off the part in the kit and glue in some sheets of the off-cut plastic to fill the gap. So once all the cockpit sections are assembled, they all get a coat of black primer. Now the instructions call for XF63 German grey for the interior. But looking at the colour of the photo etch parts, which is really quite pale, rightly or wrongly, I opt for XF22 RLM grey. I figured maybe then they'd look okay once the cockpit was assembled. So once the photo etch panels were glued on, the shade was just way too pale. So I very lightly sprayed XF22 over the top of the photo etch panels to unify the colour. I then picked back out the detail on the photo etch using a micro cotton swab and some thinners. I then dry brush all the cockpit parts using Vallejo metal colour aluminium. Once done, everything is given a coat of flat varnish. Then, because this aircraft is stationed in the desert, I add some Vallejo desert dust pigments to the cockpit area and fix them with AK's landing gear dust effect. And then some staining with my favourite brown wash for German dark yellow. The necessary holes are drilled in the lower wing section. The seam on the leading edge of the wing is carefully scraped away using a new scalpel blade, before being sanded with first 800 and then 1000 grade sanding sticks. Mr. Hobby's dissolved putty is used to fill any seam gaps. The plastic wing control surface actuators are removed to make way for the photo etch ones later. And then the wing assembly can be glued onto the fuselage. After gluing the horizontal stabilisers in position, I visually check that they're level. And the same check needs to be done on the undercarriage. I like to use PVA for gluing on canopies. The glue dries clear and strong, and the canopy can be removed if necessary. Now the model's ready for priming. First I clean it with some IPA and then I spray it with Tamiya's fine grey surface primer straight from the can. Once the model's in primer, we can all see what a terrible job I did of sanding the seam lines. Those are sorted, then I fit some of the photo etch that I should have applied before the primer. So now the whole underside of the model is painted in RLM65. And as you can see, I've just painted slightly north of where I need to mask off the underside colour. I then mask off the lower section and paint all top surfaces in RLM71. I then apply the masking for the splinter camouflage, masking off the RLM71 sections. Initially I sprayed the RLM71 a little bit light, so I deepened the shade inside the panels with another coat. It's now time to apply the desert camouflage, and I'm assuming that this was likely to be sprayed in the field, so I don't mask this RLM79, and the pattern is free-handed straight onto the model. The slight bit of overspray you can see here was removed with a 2000 sanding pad. I then for the first time used VMS's Varnish HD gloss. The gloss finish you get from this product is fantastic, and it says on the bottle that it does not require thinning. Now I didn't thin it, and once dry I did find that the build of this product is really very high, and you do risk infilling some of the panel line detail. So next time I'd probably choose to thin this around 40%. That way I'd hope to achieve a good gloss finish but use less product. And the only reason I'm using a gloss varnish at this stage is to allow the decals to lay onto the model properly and to avoid any silvering. Another option here to avoid spraying the whole model in a gloss is just to locally apply the varnish where the decals are to be applied. So once the decals have been laid down, they're given at least 24 hours to dry. I then take a 3000 Trizact pad and remove any imperfections in the gloss varnish layer. I'm blowing any dust out of the panel lines with the airbrush. And once everything's nice and flat, I move back to the old faithful Mr. Colour semi-gloss varnish. I now move to weathering the model, and with the desert in mind, I decide to use buff oil for the top surfaces and sepia oil for the undersides. I use Abteilung's own fast drying thinner to make a wash. I help speed up the drying time of the oil with an airbrush. Before removing the excess with a soft cloth, leaving the oil inside the recesses of the panel lines. The satin varnish provides a small amount of grip for the oil to cling on inside the panel line recesses. but is also glossy enough to allow me to wipe the excess oil off the top surfaces without leaving any residue. And once this whole process is finished, I give the whole model a light dusting with a matte varnish. I then simulate wear and tear by applying some aluminium chipping with a fine brush. Especially while applying varnish, sometimes the spray can be forced under the masking of the canopy. By the time this spray hits the plastic on the inside, it's usually dry and can easily be removed with a cotton bud. Here I'm using a soft piece of sponge to apply paint chips to the leading edges of the wings. I then apply some staining around the engine covers using Abteilung's engine grease and their matte thinner. I apply some desert dust pigments to the tread plates on the wing roots. The exhaust staining down the fuselage is simulated using Tamiya wooden deck tan and red brown, followed by sienna, desert dust and smoke pigments. Light touches of pigment fixer around the edges spreads through the pigment and fixes it to the model. Paint wear and scuffing to some of the panels is simulated using AK weathering pencils buff and light green. The full canopy is then masked and painted in the same manner as the windshield section. Now I'm not sure if this is a characteristic of the Stuka or not, but I wanted to simulate some exhaust muck being swept under the wing root. The bomb's plastic tail fins were cut off and replaced with photo etch. This was then given a coat of black primer, painted in Tamiya German grey, before being stippled with Ammo's rainmark effects. Notice here the cutout at the back part of the pilot's canopy section. Now I think this should be removed to allow the canopy to fully open past the aerial. Now at this late stage I didn't do that on this build through fear of damaging the canopy, but it is something to bear in mind for future builds. I used MIG Ammo's 0.3 rigging elastic for the aerial antenna. Fixing it at each end with a tiny amount of CA glue. And with that last step, that sees the model finished. And I hope you enjoyed this build. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you did like it and you would like to see more of my future builds, it would be great if you subscribe to the channel. Now I'm looking forward to getting on with the next build. Happy modelling everyone, and see you next time.